Thank you, everyone. So I'll make sort of a little bit of historical talk as well as maybe some pearls of wisdom. I don't think you could learn anything more about rotational atherectomy or atherectomy in general than what you see here from Samin and Annapurna. Just absolutely spectacular work. So it's an interesting question. Do we need the Rotablator? And you know, certainly given it a lot of thought. Is it a critical part of your armamentarium? And I just can't believe it's still a question. I mean, it's absolutely amazing that, you know, after all these years, people are still considering this controversial, that rotational atherectomy, you know, should we use it as a bailout? Should we use it as conventional therapy? I'm absolutely astounded. In fact, the book that I wrote, which was written in, if anybody could believe this, was written in 1995. That's quite a few years ago. And here's my Rotablator certificate training program. I took a picture of it for everybody. This is 1993. So my math is not great, but that's 25 years ago. And is that right? Yeah. Geez. And we're still asking the same question about rotational atherectomy. I think it's sort of crazy, to be perfectly honest. So proof also is in the industry. The Rotablator has finally been updated, maybe not the mechanics of it, but certainly the ease of use. We now have CSI, which I think you saw today. And just as a historical perspective, I was actually introduced to CSI in 1996, 97. It was called a Sturman device. It was a Russian guy who came to Seattle to visit me and David Oth, and he showed us this concept of an elliptical burr. And it's only been the fortitude of CSI and some other very, very stubborn and hardworking people that we're finally able to see the fruition of that in the device that we have today. Shockwave is another company looking at atherectomy. They've developed a lithotripsy device for the coronaries and for the periphery. Carlo DiMario, who's here, has shown me some beautiful cases that they've done in Europe. And this is a balloon technology. And then obviously there's new cutting balloons, which I think Samin has used several of them earlier, which demonstrates the need for atherectomy. So it's no longer just a strategy. I just think it's part of the equipment. You wouldn't ask guide wires necessary or balloons necessary. I just think it's what we do at this point in time. So if you look at the University of Washington experience, you know, what is our percentage of rotational atherectomy or atherectomy in general, and I'm including laser. It's 28%, and percent of IVUS is probably about 30 or 40%. So we do a lot of atherectomy, a lot of debulking, and a lot of imaging. And I think Samin mentioned that locally here, his usage is somewhere about 15 to 20%. So it's really quite high as well. So why not use it? First of all, it's clearly road tested over the years. There was some debate earlier, and George did a great job highlighting some of the issues about rotational atherectomy, but you know, we know when to use pacemakers and speeds, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then there were unique complications such as reflow, spasm, dissection. Those are no longer really significant issues, and I'll speak to that a little bit as well. Just for some data points, the frequency of heavy calcification, and you know, seen in at least the syntax is, as you can see here, fairly significant in the PCI group. It was over 50%, and as well as in the CABG group or the bypass group. So obviously, these are not, you know, sort of arteries you got to search for. If you look at ROTAXUS, again, these are paclitaxel cases, but again, significant high levels of calcification and rotational atherectomy being used, and the strategy being extremely successful, in excess of 90%. Looking at ROTATE, another planned rotational atherectomy versus provisional. You sort of lower your eyes and your attention on the lower portion of this slide. Just shows that, generally speaking, by using Rotablator, that upfront use of it, just declare it, you'll have less fluoro time, less procedural time, less contrast, and I would suggest that all of that is true in our experience, and I think many of the experiences that you're seeing here today clearly outline that. In terms of using it in DES, again, if they're severely calcified vessels, the outcomes are not as good. So I think doing rotational atherectomy and prepping the vessel is very, very important and very, very helpful. And then looking at just the one-year outcome for ischemic events in the ACS population, we see once again that calcium portends a higher risk and a less optimal outcome, suggesting once again that rotational atherectomy would be beneficial. This is just looking at the type of lesions that we're doing. Right now, for instance, again, at the University of Washington, obviously we have Bill Lombardi there, but we do about 1,000 PCIs there, and about 400 of them, almost 450, are CTOs, elective CTOs. So we see a tremendous complexity of cases where we are. And then we know that the effect is generally to increase the compliance. I don't think anybody has the impression that they're going to reduce restenosis with this or change the restenotic element, but overall the concept would be to allow the stents to expand more adequately. And these are just trials that look at IVUS and stent expansion and how important all of that is. Now, just looking at the devices real quickly, I have just a minute. I just want to make a couple of points. Obviously, we have NC balloons, cutting balloons, angiosculpt. Now, there are several other devices, laser, atherectomy, rotational atherectomy, and orbital. I'll just go through some of the, here's the algorithm that was published in JACC in 2014, methods of how to decide upfront, the strategy. I think many of you have seen this, but overall, if you see moderate to severe luminal calcium, that you'll use the Rotablator. So as I mentioned, it was approved in '93. So let's talk about a couple of things real quickly about the device. I think it'd be sort of fun. So if you just look at the previous case, they were able to cross with a 125. All the work that I did with slow flow and no reflow and platelet activation with speeds was done with a 2.0 burr. And we picked 150 because that was the only speed for which below it you would not get microcavitation. It was all about microcavitation. Microcavitation causes platelet activation. But that was all with 2.0 burrs. 125 burrs you could run at 200, 225. 1.5 you could run that high. 1.75 you could run very high. The key is basically when you get into the larger burrs, because the larger diameter the speed goes up, that's when you get the issues. And that was not tested in the era of Plavix and all the other antiplatelets we have. So I have no problem doing that. The second thing, the reason why that probably crossed with the 125 is the 125 is the only burr with a shorter length, so the arc, the radius of curvature is less, so it's more likely to be able to cross that lesion. And then finally, the most important thing that they did during that last case in terms of crossing with the Rotablator was they didn't push it, because if they ever got across that and they didn't debulk it, they would have never got that burr out. That burr would have got stuck beyond the lesion. And remember, the backside of the burr doesn't have any diamonds, so they would have got stuck. So they did a very nice job. So with that, maybe I'll just stop there, and I'll wait for the rebuttal.